Good afternoon, good morning rather, and thank you to the chairman and ranking member for this important hearing. It complements the work that we're doing in judiciary on the crime, terrorism, and Homeland Security Committee, and I'm delighted to be part of this committee and this focus of this morning. Thank you to all of the witnesses for your presentation. Let me, and your service, because these are very trying and difficult times. Let me quickly start with Attorney General Nessel and refer to Michigan's Anti-Terrorism Act that I believe was passed in the early 2000s, 2002. I would be eager to know the value of that particular statute as you attempted or worked to prosecute the perpetrators who attempted to harm a state official, a government official, a official in essence of the United States serving the state of Michigan. How did you utilize that statute?
Well, the statute has been invaluable, quite honestly. I think it really speaks to the importance of it having been passed. When you say how did we utilize it, we have utilized this in a number of different circumstances. In fact, to follow up on something that AG Ford said, we have a case that's pending right now in terms of an individual that threatened to blow up our state capitol building. And we were able to utilize this particular act in order to charge him. And quite honestly, you know, there are aspects of this law that allow us to prosecute in a litany of different circumstances that, but for this specific act, we either wouldn't be able to charge at all, or we would have to charge very, very minor offenses that I honestly don't think would be fitting for the conduct. Unfortunately, over the course of really just the last year, we've had to charge this in a number of different circumstances, as we've had incidences of domestic terrorism rise exponentially. But, you know, as I indicated earlier, it fits so many different categories of criminal conduct, but it is not overly burdensome, is not overly specific in a way that it hinders us. So, you know, it's been very helpful, and I'd recommend it at the federal level.
Well, in the course of recommending it, have you found in your tenure the misprosecution of individuals who are simply civil rights protesters or Black Lives Matter, or the disparate treatment between what would be militia with the intention to kidnap a governor versus those who are simply protesting? Has that happened?
No, I haven't seen many incidences of that at all. And if you look again at the law, it's pretty specific as to what it involves. But I have not seen it abused. I'm not saying that there are no sets of circumstances under which that could potentially occur. But again, I think that goes back to why I think it's important to have these multi-layered task forces so that we don't see one particular office working alone where you might have intentions that are not always pure. So
thank you.
But I feel like it's been used well in our state.
Thank you so very much. My time is short. General Ford, very quickly, thank you all for your service, but let me pose to you, as Las Vegas and Nevada has faced so many challenges. Thank you for your leadership. How do we balance having a terrorism initiative on the federal level and making sure that the protection of those who are lawfully protesting, such as a contrast between the treatment of the insurrectionists on January 6th versus the over arresting of those in Washington, D.C. that were Black Lives Matter during the summer of 2020. General Ford?
Yeah, thank you so much, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Great to see you again, and thank you so much for that question. It's an important one. And the truth of the matter is we must always balance the rights of individuals with matters of security and safety. We cannot ban all vulgar, derisive, or controversial rhetoric as terrorism, and the U.S. Supreme Court has opined that to prosecute specific conduct or language has been evident as being evidence of intimidation or other malevolence, that there must be a real threat. I do have concerns about a bill that would not be narrowly tailored to separate and distinguish between what you indicated as peaceful protesters, as opposed to those who are co-opting their protest and potentially engaging in terroristic acts. And so, to the extent there's going to be consideration for a bill in that regard, we have to be conscious of that fact. While General Nessel has indicated that we don't necessarily see that happening relative to her state, we could see it happening. And at the end of the day, we want to be cautious about that and ensure that it doesn't occur. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Meyer. We'll have to leave it at that. And for our final question of our hearing today, I yield to the gentlewoman from Texas, Representative Jackson Lee.
Madam Chair, thank you so very much. And let me join my colleague from New Jersey in acknowledging that 8 people are dead in Atlanta and 10 are dead in the great city of Boulder, and that we offer our deepest sympathy but pain. And as many of you have faced that in Wisconsin and Michigan and of course Nevada, I think the hearing today must be focused on the reality that whenever the federal government speaks, it is the heavy hand. It is the statement of this nation. I was on the campus when 9/11 occurred. I saw the building smoke in the Pentagon and heard the cries and claims that they were coming toward the Capitol, the White House, and the State Department. That kind of terrorism is something that broke America's naivete, even though we had already experienced Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma. So terrorism is something that is stark, it's devastating, and for us to be able to find a way to put a stop sign and to give you the tools to do so is important. But at the same time, we know what happened to the Black Panthers, the new Black Panthers, Black Lives Matter. And I think it's very important to make that point here today. So let me start, and I will give the question for all three to answer, starting with the district attorney. I did not get a chance, Mr. Chisholm, to ask you a question. Thank you so very much for that. But would you give me what the dominant description of those attacking the government today are in terms of intelligence, in terms of what you see in your community, and the one tool, the most important tool that you would need? District Attorney Chisholm, then General Ford, and then General Nessel, if you would ask those questions. Thank you so very much. District Attorney Chisholm.
Thank you very much, Representative. The predominant profile of a person is somebody that is deeply disaffected and has lost faith in the government and believes that they are entitled to take action on their own. And that's what poses the greatest risk. Again, I believe that what has been most effective is when we work together very closely and we have the proper restraints in place by having, for example, prosecutors both at the local, state, and federal level screening information and making sure it is not used inappropriately against people who are simply exercising their constitutional rights. My experience is that that's been done appropriately.
Thank you so much. General Ford, in terms of whether you've been seeing white racism as a dominant force. General Ford?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, the short answer is absolutely. I mean, and we have to acknowledge that. And so thank you for asking the question so that we can acknowledge that. And to address these issues, I think I would say 3 things. First of all, funding is very important. We've talked about that. Funding from the federal government could be very helpful. Second, increasing joint agency cooperation can assist our investigatory and prosecutorial efforts between agencies, and I think that's important. And then thirdly, just figuring out an examination of federal law and how people are actually being radicalized, and the proliferation of terrorism is playing into all of this, especially on the internet. You know, I won't go as far as my colleague and say that all the blame lies on the internet, but I will say that a lot of the radicalization is taking place on the internet. And so we should look at ways in which we can address that issue and use federal partnerships to help effectuate some change in that arena as well.
Thank you, General Nessel. And the dominant type of terrorists that you've seen, white militia, white racism, other kinds, please. Thank you. You're muted.
Right. What we learned in our investigation in Michigan is that, subjects who intend to commit politically motivated violence don't always fit into neat little boxes. But we know that the motivation behind a radicalized person can be complicated, and their worldview doesn't always make sense. But of course, that doesn't make them any less of a threat. So the militia extremists today that we see, they often adhere to conspiracy-based theories that are both, white supremacy in nature, right-wing extremist ideology agendas. While we have seen left-wing, anarchists that sometimes join militias promoting constitutionalist or libertarian values, more often than not, what we see is that it's race-based, white supremacy-based, and right-wing based. That's just been our experience here in Michigan. But just very quickly to follow up on something you said earlier, listen, I desperately want to make sure that we are protecting peaceful protesters that are members of Black Lives Matter. But I need the tools to be able to protect Black lives. And that is what is critical to me here in the state of Michigan.